according to Travis and Greg McMichaels, they're giving commands to Ahmaud Arbery to stop. This is captured when this is going on. Mr. Bryan is outside of his residence, and he has a surveillance video camera that captures this shooting down his driveway. So you see Travis McMichael's truck and Ahmaud Arbery in his driveway, and according to Mr. Bryan's statement as well, he sees them trying to pursue Ahmaud Arbery. In the video, you actually see Ahmaud Arbery trying to get away. He's running backwards. The truck would move backwards, and he's moving forward. He's trying to escape at that point in the video. According to Mr. Bryan's statement, he does not know Travis McMichael. He has met Greg McMichael, but he didn't recognize Greg McMichael at that time because Greg McMichael was in the passenger seat of the truck. But he recognized the truck as a truck that's in the neighborhood. So then he yells, "Do you got him?"
When you say he yells, "Do you got him?" who are you referring to?
Bryan is yelling to the person in the truck who he doesn't know. He doesn't get a response. Mr. Bryan, his statement, then goes into his residence, gets the keys to his truck, comes out, and cranks up his truck with the intention of assisting in the pursuit.
So at that point, Roddy Bryan makes the decision to enter his residence, correct?
Yes.
Get his keys?
Yes.
And then what kind of vehicle does he get in to join the pursuit of Mr. Arbery, the deceased victim?
He is in a 2018 Chevy Silverado gray in color.
So there might not have been a lot of pre-coordination, but clearly Bryant was an active participant in what happened. Well, that's according to the GBI. All right, we can jump back live into the preliminary hearing. Agent Dial is now being cross-examined by the defense attorneys. Let's go.
Delay in reviewing those records, I think, because of some legal concerns that have been raised involving privilege.
Okay. What is it that you're looking for exactly, and how does it fit into your case?
Judge, I have to object. I think that's fishing and not relevant to the issue of probable cause, which is facts and circumstances of the death on February 23rd of 2020.
I will have a question.
Well, it depends on the various items of what we're looking for. Of course, each...
You mentioned phone records, cell phones, and social media.
Yes, sir. During this case, it came through interviews. We've established that communication was made in reference to the incident through social media. There is also...
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your answer.
Okay. There were communications that were made about the shooting.
By whom?
By Greg McMichael. Through Facebook. He posted about it through Facebook, as well as contact was made from witnesses to him through Facebook, which subsequently followed up with a call from him to at least one witness where he described what occurred. There has also been pictures of the crime scene posted on social media by some of the McMichael family.
You know who posted them?
I do. Lindsay McMichael posted at least one. She has admitted to posting one photograph of the crime scene. We have interviews with other witnesses that indicate there may be, or another witness indicates there may be more photos that were posted. So that's one of the search warrants we are exploring.
Okay. Anything else on social media?
Yes, sir. There is some comments that were made in reviewing Travis McMichael's cell phone concerning comments he had made about burglary in the area that occurred in the area that was posted on Satilla Shore's Facebook page. So we are seeking his Facebook records in reference to following up on those comments, as well as comment he made through Instagram with the witness that we believe may be pertinent to this case.
Okay. And his comments on Facebook or Instagram, these are after the shooting or before?
Before.
Okay. And those are relevant to you about what was happening in the neighborhood? Is that what you're saying?
No, people are talking about that there's break-ins in the neighborhood. I believe in one comment, Travis McMichael makes the comment through his Facebook, arm up. In another comment, people are talking about that there was I believe it's an entering auto that occurred in the neighborhood, and he said, better hope they don't come to this side of the neighborhood.
Okay.
Or they better hope they don't come to this side of the neighborhood.
And what is it that you understood he was referencing specifically?
I understood he was referencing conducting physical harm to whoever was entering the autos and doing
Well, I'm also asking, I guess, what is it that he's referring to about break-ins in the neighborhood? Is there more specific details about that?
Yes, through our review of the record, it appears that there were 2 entering auto reports, which includes his vehicle, somebody on January 1st of 2020, during he alleges that someone went into his unlocked truck and removed a firearm. There's also one other report in reference to an entering auto. I believe there's been reviewing the records from the Glenn County Police Department going back to July 1st. I believe there's one other allegation involving a theft, but in that report, the person is renting a room in a house and is alleging that the person in the house has stolen something from the room. And then there is one call in reference to a burglary, but there's no report attached to it. It appears that a burglary alarm went off, and that comes from a call report. But throughout the Still Shores Facebook page, there's discussion of those events and his written comments were reference to those events.
So this Still Shores Facebook page, is it your understanding that, I'm going to talk about Mr. McMichael, I'm talking about Travis. Okay. That he was aware of what was happening with break-ins and burglaries in Still Shores?
Yes, sir, from that Facebook. Yes, sir.
From the Facebook group?
Yes, sir, and I believe there's also discussion amongst it. I know he was familiar with the February 11th, 2020 incident where he believed Mr. Aubrey had went into the house under construction because he actually called 911 in that incident.
Okay, all right. So what you're looking for then is any statements made by him through social media about his knowledge of these break-ins and burglaries and what he has to say about them.
With the Facebook, yes.
With the Facebook. And then the cell phone records, are you looking for calls between individuals, or are you looking for things that he may have done on his phone?
Yes, sir, calls. Really, the day in question, he allowed, his phone was present, his phone was used to call 911. It was downloaded by the Glenn County Police Department, but the time data for that 911 call was not captured during the phone download. So part of the cell phone request for record is hopefully to capture that communication as well as to show if there's any communication between parties.
Okay. And I think you've also mentioned, are you aware that you have sought Mr. McMichael's truck?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What is it that you're looking for in the truck?
We actually
assist you in your investigation.
Sure. We actually completed a search warrant on the truck. The belief was that his truck contained a computer module, which at that time I believe all modern vehicles did, but his turned out not to have a computer in the engine. But that can have data concerning devices that are connected to it, as well as various events that are recorded within those computer systems. His truck being present at the scene of the shooting, we were hoping to capture some of the data with that. Of course, the search warrant, once we got the truck and looked, there was no computer system in the truck. The search warrant also authorized us to photograph during the body camera footage from the day of the shooting. The toolbox to his truck is up, and there is a Confederate flag sticker displayed on the toolbox. So we saw the search warrant to document that as well.
Going back to you coming onto the case, I think you were asked by the district attorney about how you got brought into the case.
Yes, sir.
It sounded like that you testified that you called to see if you could lend some assistance to the investigation. Is that correct?
I did not, no, sir. I believe it was the director of my agency called.
Mr. McDonald's?
I believe so, yes, sir, but I have not had a conversation with him about that. That's just my understanding.
You know him to be the director.
Oh, yes, I made the call.
You're not sure if he made the call, but it was your agency that reached out to ask if they could get involved.
Yes, sir, that's my understanding.
Do you know why your agency asked to get involved?
I do not. That'd be a question for him, sir.
Okay. Or whether they were asked by anybody in particular to get involved?
I do not know that personally.
What
No.
have you heard? Or what have you
I have my understanding that the governor has made a statement to that effect in the news media that he directed the director, but that was relayed to me secondhand. I did not receive that directly.
Did you get any information about what the governor directed Mr. Reynolds to do?
No, sir.
In your getting into the case, did you consult with any attorneys as you were moving into the case around May 5th and May 6th?
We, not at May 5th or May 6th, no, sir. On May 7th, we had a meeting with Tom Durden, which was the district attorney assigned to the case, where we laid out and discussed the legal aspects of the case with him.
And was he your point of contact in terms of discussing what warrants you might take?
Yes, sir. At that time, yes, sir.
Okay. This was prior to the DA from Cobb County being involved, Ms. Holmes?
That's correct, yes, sir.
And so as you are stepping into the case, you said that you received information that you were going to get involved around May 5th. Is that correct?
I got a call on the evening of May 5th by my SAC advising that the GBI had been requested in reference to the case.
SAC Special Agent in Charge?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, Special Agent in Charge. I then received a call from my inspector in the morning of the 6th, instructing me that I was the assigned case agent.
Did you learn anything about the case from either of them?
No, sir, not
Or what the directive may be?
just to investigate the case, was my understanding.
Were you aware of the shooting that had happened back on February 23rd prior to the 5th?
Yes, sir, I was.
Were you aware of what was happening with demonstrations and what was happening with sort of unrest in the community?
Yes, sir, I was.
Had you at any time ever spoken with Glenn County Police Department, anyone in Glenn County, about their investigation prior to your involvement?
We had a discussion with them about the expected protests, but
When was that conversation?
I know there was, I believe earlier that week, that Monday, I believe, there was, if that or the week before.
In May?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There was information about a protest, and the Glenn County Police Department interim chief of police, Jay Wiggins, contacted all local and state law enforcement in the area to have a meeting in reference to possible resources they could provide in reference to any protests that could occur.
What was your belief about the work that Glenn?
All right, you're hearing the cross-examination of this key witness right now, this detective, this investigator from the GBI, and really some interesting notes that we just heard, including the fact of the social media post from Travis McMichael. Big part. So let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
And ask his legal opinion concerning various matters.
Okay, so when you get involved in the morning of May 6th, by the afternoon of May 7th, you said you have reviewed facts.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay.
And conducted investigative acts.
And conducted investigative acts.
Yes.
What did those investigative acts include?
Well, we had an agent. I cannot recall every investigative act that was conducted during that time.
When we called you there, I understand that. And if you need to refer to your case file that you brought with you, we can give you the time to do that.
But they would necessarily would not. My case file was not complete, so I wouldn't know if those acts had been documented or not. So that would not help me to properly reflect all the investigative acts that occurred.
What I want you to focus on, if you don't mind, is you made a decision to take warrants for felony murder and aggravated assault against Travis McMichael
I did, yes,
after and then of May 7th. So
Yes,
within a little greater than a 24-hour period.
Yes, sir.
So I'm asking you then, what investigative acts did you do within that 32-hour period to make the decision that an arrest needed to be made?
And I understand, and I can tell you some of the investigative acts, but I cannot give you a complete list.
Got it.
Okay. We had an agent interview Larry English to establish that there was no theft at the residence. We also...
Why was that important to you to establish there was no theft at the residence?
Because part of the letter that you referenced to George Barnhill, he was alluding to the fact that there was a burglary in progress. There's no evidence of a burglary taking place. The fact that Mr. Aubrey had been there numerous times before, nothing had been taken. The fact that they were reported as trespassing, not burglary. Again, we had reviewed all Greene County Police Department's case file. We then...
At that time, you had reviewed the Greene County case file within that 32-hour period?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That means all of their written reports,
Yes, sir.
the medical examiner's report,
Yes, sir.
photographs taken.
Yes, sir.
Didn't have cell phone records at that time?
There was cell phone download. That part we had problems getting into because of the format, and I don't really understand that. I am not a technically wise person, but the person that was assigned to look at those cell phone records had issues getting into them.
All right, everybody, let's jump back live into the preliminary hearing in the Ahmaud Arbery case out of Georgia. Again, it's a determination. Is there enough evidence to proceed against Gregory and Travis McMichael and William Bryan? Now, the GBI agent who's been on for a lot of this morning, he's under cross-examination by the defense. Let's go.
There was no burglary that had happened in your mind. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it that you believe that an item has to actually be stolen for the burglary to be committed?
My understanding of the law is for burglary to commit, you have to enter a structure with the intention of committing a felony or a theft. Neither of fact could I establish in this investigation Mr. Aubrey had committed.
Okay, but the burglary statute, to your knowledge, does not require an actual theft to be completed. It can be to enter simply with the intent to commit a theft.
But at no time did it appear he was interrupted and he didn't steal anything. So I do not think you could establish as a point of law that his intention was to steal something if he had been in the residence multiple times and never taken something and then he left without taking anything. That was my reasoning.
Are you aware of all of the times that Mr. English called the police about a suspicious person in his residence?
I am aware that he has called the police in the past about a suspicious person in the residence, yes, sir.
Are you aware if there are videos that exist of those moments where he saw a suspicious person on his cameras?
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed that video footage?
I have reviewed the video footage he has provided to us, yes, sir.
And when is the video footage from? What dates is it from?
I don't recall the dates.
Okay. Does October 25th, 2019 sound familiar?
Could be, yes, sir.
November 18th, 2019?
Could be, yes, sir.
February 11th, 2019?
That one I do remember, yes, sir.
And in the video footage, you're saying you don't see anybody stealing anything, actually?
I don't see Mr. Aubrey stealing anything. Like I said, there were children that took some scrap wood, but he did not consider...
When did that happen?
I don't remember the date on that.
But not the dates I've just disclosed?
I don't believe so, no,
Okay.
sir. And my understanding is he knew the children and did not really consider that. I don't believe he called the police on that instance.
The 911 calls from those incidents, have you reviewed those 911 calls by Mr. English to see whether the statement he gave you about no theft matched what he told the police?
I have reviewed the report from February 11th, which reviews that. But the 911 call, I do not believe I have personally reviewed it, no, sir.
To make a determination if he was reporting to police contemporaneously that he had in fact everything stolen.
Judge, I object to relevance. All of these questions are involving other acts, and we're here for probable cause as to the issuance of the arrest warrants for February 23rd of 2020. I don't believe you had any questions about that today.
May I respond now?
Yes.
The issue that I believe we heard on direct testimony was that there was a history of problems in the neighborhood that neighbors were communicating about, that Travis McMichael and his father believed that, I think the testimony was, the guy was running past the house. And so I'm merely inquiring if he is aware of the statements that the homeowner who owns the residence that was being burglarized, if he has reviewed that enough to determine whether that person's statements actually do establish a burglary or not.
I'll let you answer the question.
Thank you. So I guess my question was, it sounds like the answer is no. The 911 calls you have not reviewed. What Mr. English is telling the police contemporaneously on October 25th or November 18th about whether he believes something was stolen.
I have reviewed the February 11th report from the police where he clearly tells them that nothing has been taken, that the person is doing no damage.
On February 11th?
On February 11th, yes, sir.
I got you.
And in the past, he notes that in the report. So I have reviewed that police report, which is a statement that he made to a law enforcement officer prior to this shooting incident. I have also reviewed Greg McMichael's statement made to the Glenn County Police Department, where he says that he knew nothing was taken on February 11th. He didn't believe anything had been taken from the house in the past. He said it's possible, but he didn't believe so.
I'll get to that. You had begun to speak a little bit about Mr. Arbery's background. You were asked questions about athletics and things that he did for leisure. I think running was one of those things.
Yes, sir.
Did you get any information about where he would go for runs and whether that included the Satilla Shores neighborhood?
I did, yes, sir.
And what did you learn about whether he had run previously in Satilla Shores?
Yes, we found witnesses in Satilla Shores that had confirmed that he did run through Satilla Shores.
Did they give you an estimation of when that was, or just that they had seen him generally before?
I don't recall. I believe there were the witnesses we interviewed. I did not personally interview him, but relayed to me is that they had seen him run through the neighborhood before. That at least one of them had engaged in frequent conversations with him while he was running through there, and I believe they gave the time frame that they would normally see him running through the neighborhood.
And that witness, have you documented that interview with the witness's name and contact information?
It will be documented. I did not do the interview.
That
Yes.
is something that has happened since the arrest on May 7th?
No, that was before May 7th.
That was before?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of what we were talking about, is what you had done in that 32-hour period. Larry English was one person that you spoke to. What else did you do in that period of time?
We conducted a neighborhood canvass at Satilla Shores, where again we located the witnesses that had seen Mr. Arbery running. We spoke with family members who confirmed that he ran. I'm sorry, that's all that comes to the top of my head. But I know there was other investigative acts that were accomplished, but I don't recall them.
But these investigative things that you're doing, this is going to assist you in making your decision about whether or not to arrest for felony murder, correct?
No, that's correct. And I do remember, too, that we actually had received enhanced audio and we've stabilized video from the 911 call that Greg McMichael had that occurred during the shooting. That was reviewed. Like I
You
said,
said enhanced video. Do you mean Mr. Bryan's video?
Yeah, I do. It was stabilized, is what they call it, where it makes it where it's not as shaky, moving back and forth. That was done by ROCIC for us. I believe we obtained that before the arrest warrants were sought. So yes, sir.
And then I think you've already said that you reviewed the entire Glenn County file, which included Mr. McMichael's statements, also his father's statements, and Mr. Bryan's statement.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, so I'm here again with Terry Austin, Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, what do you think about this cross-examination? What are they trying to show?
So at times you have hearings, Jesse, and you can use them for two purposes. You can use them for either gathering facts or for trying to win the hearing. I think this is the first one. I don't think they're trying to win the hearing. I think Terry's already pretty much put it out there that the evidence here is enough to show probable cause that they committed this crime. It's not about whether or not they're guilty, just probable cause whether or not they committed this crime. A lot of these questions, I think, are a fact-finding expedition. That's why you're hearing objections beyond the scope, and the defense is creating creative ways as to why they can go into different avenues. Confirming whether or not Ahmaud Arbery actually ran in the community has nothing to do with whether or not there's probable cause he's committed this crime. I think at some point it's actually insulting to ask that question, but I know as a lawyer you have to examine the whole landscape and figure out as much information as possible.
Terry, look, they're challenging the arrests, and are they trying to say that the public pressure is what amounted to these arrests, that it was properly investigated, they had a proper justification? George Barnhill, who was the DA at one point who was handling this, even thought it was a proper justification. Is that where they're going with this line of questioning?
I think that's exactly where the defense is going with this line of questioning. He's trying to say that the GBI didn't do their own independent investigation. They relied on these former prosecutors who either have recused themselves or clearly have some sort of conflict. And I think the defense is trying to say here that the arrest was made too soon, too quickly. You didn't do any independent investigation. And so my client should not be arrested and should not be, pursued for trial.
Let's hit a quick break. When we come back, we'll be live.
Had made that horrible statement. Had
Not that I'm aware of, he hasn't. He had not provided that information nor provided information concerning the video that he had at his residence, surveillance video that captured.
Right, somebody else released that video.
No, I'm talking about the surveillance video at his house.
His home house.
Yes.
Okay.
He revealed that to us as well, and we were able to get a copy of that.
And that was on the 13th?
I believe so, yes, sir. But I'm not. That might have been the 11th. I don't recall what day that occurred on.
Okay. But the answer to the question is, he had been, I'll rephrase, he had been asked about the shooting from as far back as February 23rd and given statements to police about it at that time.
He was interviewed on February 23rd where he made no mention about that statement. As far as I know, he was not interviewed again until my agent contacted him in May.
And preceding that interview, I think you just testified that his attorney got involved and was a part of the decision to have him come forward and be interviewed on the 11th and the 13th.
His attorney was present, yes, sir, during the interviews, if that's your question.
Yeah. And was the district attorney present at that meeting as well?
No.
Just yourself or one of your agents?
One of my agents did the interview, and I believe another agent was called in to help with the technical involving. There was a consent to download his phone again, so another agent assisted in that matter. But yes, sir, that's all I believe was there.
Has that been recorded and documented?
As far as the download of the phone?
No, the interview of Mr. Bryant. Video recorded?
It was audio recorded. And I know it was at least audio recorded. I am not sure if it was video recorded as well. I do not know.
Are you aware if Mr. Bryant had any promises of leniency at the time he made that statement?
I'm not aware of any.
Or a promise not to arrest or indict him for these charges?
I'm not aware of any.
Not aware. Is that something that you would typically be made aware of?
I did not have any conversation with the attorney or him, so.
Okay. All right. Talking with Mr. English, neighborhood cameras, getting information about him running, the audio, the 911, any other evidence that you reviewed before your arrest decision?
Well, again, like I said, we spoke with the family. We obtained background information on the victim. I don't recall. There may have been other investigative acts. I believe there were, but I did not recall them offhand.
Okay. Did you determine whether or not Mr. Arbery ran in a particular type of clothing or whether the cargo shorts was something that he would run?
I did. Through the interviews that he would run in all types of clothing, and we established that later on in the investigation with numerous people and actually video of him running in similar clothing. He would run with whatever he had.
right, welcome back, everybody. We're about to jump live once again into the preliminary hearing for Gregory and Travis McMichael, as well as William Bryan. What did we just learn? That Bryan had told investigators that Travis McMichael had used the N-word. Now, that's important because the DOJ is considering filing hate crime charges. Let's go live.
Requested his, well, you want Greg
Travis?
Okay.
I'm only going to be asking, unless I'll say Greg McMichael.
I'm sorry, I apologize for that. For Travis McMichael, we have requested and obtained his Coast Guard training record and file, I believe. We've requested, I believe we've actually obtained it.
Why did you do that?
To understand what training he has received, during his interview with Glenn County Police Department, he states that his position as a boarding officer, that he knew from 30 to 40 yards away that Ahmaud Arbery was not going to surrender, was going to keep coming. And through that statement, I wanted to know what his training and experience was.
Was that important that he told you that? Did you find that significant at all?
I did. It helped confirm what I saw in the video, that he was, when he got out, or when he's got the shotgun up, he's pointing at him. And that helped confirm that to me.
Okay. And is it that training, did you learn about what he actually did, what his job function was in the Coast Guard? I think you said boarding? Or?
My understanding from his statements and from confirmation from the agent that had the file that he was a boarding training, which is the person that goes on the boats to board them. Now, I said I have not reviewed his entire training file as of yet.
To do what? Board other boats to do what?
To take control of the boat.
On behalf of the Coast Guard?
Yes.
Because of some activity, illegal activity or otherwise?
Yes, or secure it for search or whatever else they would do.
I understand that you have said that Mr. Bryan has put this statement coming out of the mouth of Travis McMichael, this horrible thing. In looking so far in the case, whether it's on Travis's interactions in the neighborhood Facebook page or on his phone, have you seen any other evidence that he has used that horrible N-word anywhere else?
Yes, many times.
Okay. In where?
There's on his Instagram post, he responds on one. I do not recall every time it was there, but I can give you some examples of numerous times. On the Instagram post, somebody sends him, this is on January 2nd of 2020, someone sends him a video or a picture. We were not able to recover that from the phone. That's one of the reasons why I haven't searched one out for Instagram. They send that out. He says, makes the comment, that would only be better if they'd have blown that effing N-words, or they'd blown that N-words head off.
So somebody sends him something,
and then he responds with that text.
And this is an Instagram that you've identified belonging to Travis McMichael.
It's correct. It was on his phone too.
Okay. All right. Anywhere else that you've seen this?
Yes. There are several conversations, and I do not. They were on the phone. I do not read if they were through instant messenger or through text. That I do not recall offhand. But one particular one that comes to mind.
Bryan, want to get to you. Listen, we just heard some pretty incriminating things against the defendants here. The use of the N-word by Travis McMichael, that's what Bryan said he overheard. I mean, what do you make of that?
So let me be very clear. First and foremost, this is very separate from whether or not you can or should use the word. I will choose not to use the word in this arena. But just simply using the word doesn't make it a hate crime. But what the officer is doing here now is going back to not only the incident of the shooting, where Travis uses the N-word to describe the dead and dying Ahmaud Arbery, but also go back in time to his social media to see what he uses that word for and the animus that comes from it. When you can show that pattern, we as a society can say, yeah, you're racist, but we can also say legally this could be a hate crime.
You know, on top of the fact that we knew that Lindsay McMichael, the sister, the daughter, she posted a photo of Ahmaud Arbery, and that was highly controversial. Terry, what are you looking out for next in this preliminary hearing? Because I know they're going to call several witnesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're going to see more evidence of the fact that, you know, this was a crime. It may not be able to be prosecuted under Georgia law as a hate crime. Hopefully, we'll see the federal government get involved. That's something I think the community is still looking to see if that actually happens. But as far as this criminal case is concerned, I think that they have to establish there's enough evidence here to arrest, to indict, to bring a trial against all three of these defendants. And frankly, I think based on what this individual has said so far from the GBI, I think based on that alone, there's enough. It's clear that Arbery wasn't committing a crime. He, didn't rob or burglarize any construction, and whether or not he trespassed was another thing, but the actions that these individuals took against Arbery was clearly a crime, and I think that the felony murder and the entrapment charges should stick.
Yeah, the false imprisonment. And look, Terry, I thank you for coming on. I know we have to sign you off. I know, Brian, you're going to be doing Justice and Peace right after this, going to be covering what we're hearing today. And that's our focus here on Law and Crime. We are going to continue to cover this hearing. This is something we've all been waiting for. We were told new evidence would be brought forth. We would understand more of the story from both sides. So this is something to watch, everybody. I'm going to be signing off again. Brian Buckmeyer is up next with Justice and Peace. Stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this.
Other neighbors in the Satilla Shore neighborhood believed that things had in fact been stolen from Mr. English on those occasions. Did other neighbors that you spoke to inform you that Mr. English had told them things were stolen on those occasions?
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance. I don't think we've even gotten to the date in question.
I'll let you ask the question.
I believe one neighbor mentioned that Mr. English had indicated that there was some tackle in a cooler that was taken from a boat. But Mr. English's statement is that the boat, while he noticed the items were missing while the boat was out of the residence, he parked the boat in a different county. So he doesn't really know where they went missing from. And at the time that Mr. English first noticed them missing, he believed it was workers at his house installing an HVAC unit that had taken it from the boat. But he can't say where it's gone.
I guess my question is, are you aware whether or not there are neighbors reporting that back in October or November that Mr. English had told them, I had a suspect in my house last night and I had some things stolen? Are you aware of that?
I am not, no, sir.
So you've not spoken with any neighbors that have said, Larry English told me that he had things stolen?
I have not spoken with it. I'm not aware of an agent that has spoken to someone other than what I just described to you.
Okay. What about from Travis McMichael? Did he tell you that he had been informed that things had been stolen on those prior occasions? Not on the 11th, but on those prior occasions?
Travis McMichael chose not to do an interview with me, sir.
Okay. His interview with Glenn County Police Department, did they ask or did he disclose during that interview that he had been told or he was under the belief that things had been stolen from Mr. English previously in October and November of 19?
No. Again, during his interview, he was not even aware that Ahmaud Arbery was seen inside the house on the day in question.
I know that's the day in question, but I'm talking about previous.
I'm trying to answer your question.
Oh, my fault.
Okay. What he's told Glenn County PD, to the best of my recollection during his interview, was that he knew that a lot of stuff had been, burglaries and thefts that happened in the neighborhood in the past 6 to 7 months, which is the reason why we went back and pulled all the call reports going back to July 1st of 2019 to see if, in fact, there had been. And we also did a neighborhood canvass out there, and that's one of the questions we asked. Had you had anything stolen?
What did you learn had been stolen over that 6-month period of time in that neighborhood, in that area?
There were 2 entering autos. There was one theft, again, from a bedroom, and then there was one call of a burglary, but no subsequent report of that.
What about stolen firearms?
Well, and one of the entering the autos was Travis McMichael's firearm was taken.
Are you aware of any other firearms that were taken out of cars in that time period?
I am not, no, sir.
You're not aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Were you given any information that Greg McMichaels had been told that things were stolen from Larry English's house previously back in October and November of 2019? Whether you were told yourself or you reviewed it from the Glenn County Police Department?
From the Glenn County Police Department interview that he did at the Glenn County Police Department, he said he didn't think anything had been, he knew nothing had been taken on February 11th. he didn't think anything had been taken from the house by Mr. Aubrey. He said he can't be sure. If it had to have been early on, but he didn't think so.
Did you have any information that the neighborhood Facebook group, including Mr. McMichaels and his father, had come to the opinion that there was one particular...
Afternoon, Brian Buckmeyer here, Justin in Peace. If you've been watching us so far, we've been talking about the protests and reactions, but earlier today, we had the preliminary hearing for the shooting and killing of Ahmaud Arbery by the three defendants, Travis and Gregory McMichael, as well as William Bryan. Now, we're starting to hear a lot of information that's diving deeper and deeper into, I think, what we really are getting at here in Justice and Peace. So I want to jump right into court so we can hear what's going on in the preliminary hearing.
11th, 2020.
And then up until that time, I guess, leading up to February 11th, that nobody had really been caught, that matched the description of the person in the home.
Yes, sir. I don't believe anybody had been called or even confronted with it.
At any point in time.
No, sir.
Moving to the 11th of February, what is it that you understood from Travis McMichaels through your review of the file that he observed that night and that he thought that night what he observed about Mr. Aubrey?
He saw Mr. Aubrey in the neighborhood. He said he was actually turned around and as his headlights, if I recall correctly, illuminated Mr. Aubrey. Mr. Aubrey took position. There's a porta potty in front of the house that was under construction. And it appeared to him that Mr. Aubrey was trying to hide in the shadow. He said Mr. Aubrey was grabbing his pants, his pocket. Mr. Travis McMichael said, and this is the interview he did with Glenn County Police Department on the 23rd, his concern was there may have been a gun.
Could you explain why he was concerned about that on that evening?
Because Mr. Aubrey grabbed his pants in that particular.
Grabbed his pants?
I think he said pocket, or the way Mr. Aubrey grabbed his pants, Mr. Travis McMichael was concerned there may be a firearm. He called 911 and returned to his house, where him and his father then went over to Mr. English's house to try to confront the individual. He had seen the individual go in the house. I'm sorry, I left that part out. After the grab, he saw the individual go into Mr. English's house.
And this is all information that you're aware of prior to making your arrest decision on this side?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
At any point in time, did you consider that Travis and Greg and Michael were honestly seeking to apprehend a person that they thought was burglarizing and breaking into homes and cars in the neighborhood?
No, I considered that they thought they were trying to catch the person that they believed may be responsible for what occurred so that they could detain him and identify him and let the police show up and identify him. Yes, sir.
And do you believe, based on what you've heard, that that's what they were trying to do on the 23rd, that they were trying to detain and identify this person?
I don't know if I've formed that opinion yet, no, sir. I'm still under investigation, but I know that's what their statement on the 23rd was.
That's what they shared with police, is that they were trying to do what they had been trying to do, which was to detain and identify this person.
That's correct, yes, sir.
When you say that you're thinking about that, whether that's true or not, you haven't formed your final opinion on that.
I'm just gathering the facts, sir. My investigation is not complete. So,
is it important for you, as you gather the facts in your investigation, to answer that question in your mind?
I'm going to object to the relevance of this line of question. The question is about probable cause for the issuance of these arrest warrants for the defendants in this case, and not about speculating about what might be in the defendant's mind or anything like that.
I think that's a good objection. I would sustain it.
I'll move on now. On the 23rd, is it your thought? Do you understand are you aware of the citizen's arrest law?
I am, yes, sir.
Is it your position that they were not seeking to try to use the citizen's arrest law on the 23rd against Mr. Aubrey?
So I'm going to object again for the same basis. I think that will call for speculation as to what the defendants were trying to do. I don't mind the defense asking what the defendant said. That's a different story. That's a fact matter, which might be a component of the investigation. But to ask anyone to speculate about what might be in the defendant's mind, I don't think that's pertinent, and it is speculative, and we would reject.
Unless you have an opinion about that.
It's this officer who's making the call, Your Honor. I'm asking
I'm
him.
asking if he has an opinion about
Did
that.
you form an opinion or think before you made the arrest warrant that these two gentlemen could have been trying to make a citizen's arrest?
I was concerned whether their actions were legal and they had the authority to do it, not really so much what their intention was, but whether their actions were legal.
And their actions being trying to stop a person that they believed had been burglarizing their neighborhood.
Trying to stop a person, pointing a shotgun, and ordering the person to get on the ground and subsequently killing that person. Yes.
I understand the end of what happened, but I guess my question is, from the moment that you understand the McMichaels left their driveway, let me back up. We'll get into it. You had mentioned, I had asked you about the Barnhill letter, and we were talking about Mr. Arbery. Is any part of your investigation in the Barnhill letter, do you recall reading where George Barnhill mentioned part of the reason that he wasn't going forward was because of mental health issues?
I'm going to object to the relevance of that, and it's also the character of the victim, so I don't think it's pertinent.
I don't understand who you even talking about.
Yeah, I'll rephrase, John. You recall in the Barnhill letter that there's mentioned by Mr. Barnhill that Mr. Arbery had some mental health problems.
Objection as to relevance and character of the victim.
Well, this is going into the
I don't
circumstances
look at
of what happened that day. I'm just asking if you were aware of that mention.
Yes, sir, I am.
And have you done anything to investigate that statement by Mr. Barnhill?
Yes, sir, I have.
What did you discover?
Same objection. It's not pertinent to what happened on February 23rd, 2020, and it's character of the victim potentially.
I don't think it's character.
Well, I mean, bad things happen out there. And his mental status, I'm not sure that's pertinent.
Let me respond.
So let's go something else.
May I just respond
Yeah.
to make the reason I'm asking is it's my understanding that the testimony thus far on direct has been about the interaction between Mr. Arbery and Travis McMichael and how that interaction has ebbed and flowed across an entire neighborhood. There's been opinion testimony given at the very beginning by the prosecutor that this was a chase and a hunting and an execution. And really, what we're talking about here is the interaction of two men.
Well, that's not what we're talking about.
Sorry?
That's not what we're talking about.
Well, I'm talking about whether or not, what the answers to the question about, is there anything about the mental history that could have played a role in this interaction that ultimately go to the question of whether this was a case of self-defense and not a case of felony murder and aggravated assault. So that would be the reason I would ask the question.
All right, I'll let you answer that question.
Judge, I do want to point out there's no evidence before the court. I understand that these defendants even knew what history the deceased victim in this case has. So there's sort of no purpose other than to cast his character into question. We object on that basis.
It certainly is almost immaterial, but I'll let you go ahead.
What did you want to say?
Through interviews and review of mental health records, we learned that Mr. Arbery had previously been diagnosed with a mental illness. I believe it was, I'm not 100% sure on what the exact diagnosis was.
And what were the features of that mental illness?
I believe at the time he was having auditory hallucinations, is the best I can recall, back when he had the mental health diagnosis.
Or when was that diagnosis?
I don't recall the date.
Do you have your file where you might be able to review that?
I do not believe it's in my file. That's in the Glenn County Police Department file. I have requested that a notice of subpoena be issued for the mental health records in their entirety. The ones I reviewed was in the Glenn County Police Department file.
Okay, and who is it, what officer in Glenn County was the one that uncovered that or was diving into that issue?
I believe it was requested from the coroner's office to obtain a subpoena for the mental health records. I don't remember which officer.
You can't identify for us which Glenn County officer had gathered that information?
It came from the coroner's office. I do not know which officer entered it into the Glenn County Police Department file.
Coroner's office. Do you know the provider of the records?
It's the local mental health facility. I don't know the name of it offhand. I don't know if it's Gateway or by the Sea or something like that. I don't know.
And to try to help where I was ultimately going with this, is there any evidence that you collected that mental illness was active and still ongoing or being treated on February 23rd or right before February 23rd? Do you have any information about that?
The information I have that he was not currently under treatment for the mental illness.
Not receiving medications or anything?
And that's my understanding from discussions with the family and from the records that I have.
Okay, I understand. As you were investigating and reviewing documents, were you trying to make a determination before the arrest decision of whether or not this could be a case of self-defense?
We were collecting all the facts we had available. Then, when we had a meeting with the district attorney, presented those facts, had a discussion. I mean, I don't know if that was an ongoing.
You discussed it?
Yes.
About whether or not this was a case of self-defense?
Yes, sir. That was part of the discussion.
And what are the facts and factors did you discuss that supported that this would be a case of self-defense?
That supported it?
Yes, sir.
It was just their contention that contention that at least in the second and third shot that he was striking Travis McMichael. Again, Travis McMichael is not clear. He says they were tangled up. He's not clear on the first shot that there was actually any physical violence done to him as far as a strike. He first says he shoots when Ahmaud Arbery squares up with him. Then I believe the statement is Ahmaud Arbery was rear back going to hit him, and then there's a statement that he may have had his hand on the shirt. Travis McMichael says that he was adrenaline was pumping and it all happened very quickly. I guess that answers your question.
Yeah, were there any other facts that you considered where you discussed with the district attorney this supports that Travis McMichael was using self-defense on that day?
I mean, his contention, that was his contention, and that's the facts that we had.
You mentioned a couple of times that there was, it seemed to be Travis was saying, and maybe even on video, that Mr. Arbery was striking Travis. Can you give us a little more details about what it is you understood happened with the striking? And when it happened?
Mr. Arbery was struck. Well, it depends on whose statement. Again, Greg McMichael, he only says there's two shots, and he indicates that they're striking, I believe, before the first shot.
Okay.
Travis McMichael again says that he fired the first shot into Ahmaud Arbery's chest. Says that he cannot be sure Ahmaud Arbery had struck him then, or had his hand on his shirt, or he's very unclear about that. He does know that after shooting him, that Travis McMichael backed up, and Ahmaud Arbery was striking him.
Did you see evidence of that on Travis McMichael?
He points out, and they took photographs of his face. I didn't see any visible injuries to him.
Who's they?
The Glenn County Police Department.
And you have those photographs?
They are in the Glenn County Police Department file.
Okay. Was EMS on the scene as well?
Yes, and we've interviewed the EMS, and I do not believe they offered any treatment for that. They were also trying to wash the blood off of Travis McMichael, I believe. But I think they did have him checked out because he said he was struck to the responding Glenn County Police Department officers. Again, I did not see any marks on him, but in the video you can see Ahmaud Arbery striking him.
in the Facebook group post where they're discussing about.
All right, so I'm joined here with Adam Conta, both a regular guest here at Law and Crime, but also a lawyer in New York who has been representing protesters in the last couple of days. Adam, how you doing today?
Good, Brian. How you doing?
Good. Always a pleasure to have you here. So we're talking about this both in like kind of a microcosm and a macrocosm in the Ahmaud Arbery case, but also the reactions to it as well. I'm listening to this preliminary hearing, and all I can do is go back to the original investigation and say, you heard all of this information. You reviewed all of these facts and figures and these statements, and you still didn't arrest these 3 individuals for 3 months. It took protesting and outcries when you had all of this. Does this make any sense to you?
Well, actually, I disagree with what you just said, because I don't think it did take protests and outcries. It took a video. And that's the problem, is that this happens more often than people want to admit. And let's remember that the Ahmaud Arbery shooting and murder took place February 23rd. They weren't arrested until May, 2 days after the 36-second video came out. So it's not that the investigating took that long. It's not even that it was in the face of protests. It's that they had no choice once there was actual definitive proof that this man was hunted down and murdered.
So I guess the major question becomes, why does it have to be a situation where they have, like, as you say, no choice than when they have the information? Because you said, like, February 23rd to May, they have these facts. They have these interviews. He's not saying that they found out something in the end of May or in June, because we're already in June now. So where are we seeing the disconnect here?
Well, I think that's the question that a lot of us are asking ourselves right now. You and I do this for a living, so we have a little bit more perspective on it. But for the national audience who's really taking a hold of this cause right now, I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking, because these aren't isolated incidents. And there have been tipping points before. When Michael Brown, for instance, in Ferguson several years ago, the nation was outraged and there were riots. But what's happening now is that it's all in front of people, and people are watching and listening. And we just have to hope that they keep watching and listening.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely watching. I can only hope that they're also listening as well. We're going to continue with more Justice and Peace after this break.
Probably another hour, if you allow.
You know, to the extent you care, I usually take my lunch at 12. I think you're a 1 o'clock lunch person, but if we're going to go another hour, I would really prefer to have a break.
Well, actually, I'm a 12 o'clock person.
Oh, I was wrong.
Well, what would you all like to do? Would you all like to continue now for another until 1 o'clock?
I'm happy to do it.
All right,
The court wants to do it.
Let's do that.
Okay. Approach the witness, Your Honor. Special Agent, we're going to bring the poster back up.
Okay.
Is that oriented the right way, the way we had it before? Yeah. And Bob, if you'll tilt it down. More. Yeah. Perfect. So, I think your testimony is that there is a video that picks up Mr. Arbery as he comes into or onto Satilla Drive. Is that correct?
There is a video of him from across the street from the house under construction, which is approximately here, that sees him come into frame traveling this direction.
The video camera is that.
I can't recall his name. It's his house across the street.
And you've now got a copy of that entire video, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. And on the video, what does it show Mr. Arbery is doing as he approaches the house? Is he walking or is he running?
I don't recall.
How's that?
I don't remember if he was walking or running. I remember him coming in the frame, but I don't remember if he was in a jog or running or walking.
Well, you testified that you believe he was on a jog, but you're saying you don't remember whether he was on a jog?
No, sir. You asked me when he comes in the frame, what is he doing?
And how much space do you have as he comes into frame? About how many feet of frame does he, or how many feet of road do you think that he uses as he comes up to the house?
I couldn't estimate that, sir.
Don't know.
Couldn't estimate. Okay.
Have you sought to measure any of these distances?
Welcome back to Justice and Peace. We are here watching the pursuit of justice, literally, because we have the preliminary hearing of the defendants who are charged with the felony murder of Ahmaud Arbery. I want to jump right back into the court proceedings so we can hear the officer give testimony as to the final moments of Ahmaud Arbery.
He enters into 220 Satilla at that time.
Yes, sir, he does.
And that's where we pick up at the video showing him walking into the house.
He enters the house, yes, right? So I don't know if he comes in the frame running or jogging, but he goes into the house. That's correct.
Okay. I think you testified there was an individual that called the police and came outside.
Yes.
Albenzi, does that sound right?
Yeah, Albenzi, something like that.
Any information about whether or not Mr. Albenzi shouted across the street to Mr. Arbery or said anything to Mr. Arbery?
No, sir. My understanding is he did not.
He did not say anything.
That's my understanding.
Okay. And he calls the police, and at some point I think you testified that Mr. Arbery then runs out of the house.
Yes, sir. He comes out the door and runs, which is what he has been seen to do on previous video.
Coming out of that house and running?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And he runs out of the house down, does he just run down the driveway and into the road, or does he cut across the yard? Do you notice?
I don't recall that. I don't recall.
And he begins to make his way down in front of 230 Satilla Drive, which is Greg McMichael's home. Is that what you testified to?
Yes, that's correct.
What is it that you understand Greg McMichael sees, observes, and says at that moment when he's out of his driveway?
My understanding, he sees Mr. Arbery running past. According to Greg McMichael's statement, again, he doesn't know if Mr. Arbery's chasing somebody or somebody's chasing him, but he recognized him as the person that's been in the house previously, and says that he suspects that Mr. Arbery may have been involved in thefts in the past. Okay. So he goes into the house and tells Travis that's him, and then they get the guns and proceed to get in the truck and chase Mr. Arbery.
I think you testified that Greg McMichael's former law enforcement officer and investigator for the DA's office.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And he is expressing to the police these statements back on February 23rd that it's his belief at the moment Mr. Arbery runs past that he thinks that is the individual that's been burglarizing and committing thefts in the neighborhood.
No, that's not correct.
I thought that's what you just said.
No, sir.
Okay.
He says that's the individual that he had seen in the house.
Okay.
He believes, he has a gut instinct that this person may have been responsible, although he's got, and I think he actually says, I've got no proof of that, but this person may have been responsible for various crimes in the neighborhood.
Okay. And did you get understanding of where he came to that feeling or belief from?
Just his explanation of Glenn County Police Department. Like I said, I think he actually says it's a hunch. They go into it's just like a subjective, just reasoning. He says, my reasoning is there's thefts going on and somebody's in a house under construction. So they're probably or possibly the person that may have been doing these thefts.
Would you consider it significant if Larry English had in fact told him that he had thousands of dollars worth of fishing equipment and electronics stolen from his boat around the time of October, November of 2019?
I would find it astonishing considering that Mr. McMichael tells them that he did not think anything was stolen from the house on February 23rd, 2020 during the Glenn County Police Department. So So I would think that would be a change. If he came out and said that now, I believe that would be a change in the statement he gave on the day of the murder.
Okay. Would you, okay, but, all right, we move on. So then after he runs past, you said that Mr. McMichael goes in the house and gets Travis.
Yes, correct.
And what do you understand happens next?
Mr. McMichael grabs his Greg McMichael grabs his .357 Magnum revolver. Travis McMichael grabs a 12-gauge 870 shotgun. They then get into Travis McMichael's truck. Travis McMichael driving, Greg McMichael in the passenger seat.
Let me stop you there if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. Did they explain or give any information as to why they grabbed their firearms?
Yeah, I believe Greg McMichael explains that, again, this is an individual that had been in the house over here and they didn't know if he was armed or not. So they grabbed weapons.
Did they at all reference the February 11th evening where they thought that he may be armed because he had been motioning to his pocket or reaching his pocket?
Yes, sir, I believe that was brought up during those interviews, yes, sir.
They were afraid that the same guy may have been armed.
Well, yeah, they mentioned that, but Greg McMichael also says that his gut instinct, again, was this person may have been the individual that went into Travis McMichael's truck and stole a firearm. However, he said he had no evidence of that. He had no objective reasoning for that. I believe they were going into subjective versus objective information. And but that hits his gut instinct.
Okay, but subjectively, he believed is what you're saying.
Yes, sir. That's what he said, not what I'm saying.
They get in the car, and I think you say that Greg McMichael sat in the front passenger seat, but there was a baby seat in there?
That's correct, yes, sir.
That he rode in that sort of capacity up to a certain point, is that right?
Yes, sir. According to his and Travis McMichael's statement, he rode into that until this location on Burford, where Mr. Albright turned and went back in the opposite direction.
So when they got in the car, what is it that you understood that they could still see Mr. Arbery running in that direction, or that they just drove forward to see if they could find him? Did they still have eyes on him, I guess is my question.
I don't believe that question was specifically asked. I mean, whether they still had eyes on him or not.
But they drove down Burford.
Well, they drove down Satilla first. And then on to Burford.
I think you were saying Buford earlier.
I'm sorry.
You mean Burford.
I meant Burford, yes, sir. I apologize if I misspoke.
And then at some point you learned that the McMichaels see Mr. Arbery running down Burford. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. According to both their statements, they catch up to him.
Okay. Now I think you testified that you got a video from Mr. Bryan that comes from cameras on his home.
Yes, that's correct.
Have you reviewed that video?
I have.
Okay. And do you see Mr. Arbery run past the house?
The video is apparently motion activated, so when it starts, you see, if I recall correctly, Travis McMichael's truck and Mr. Arbery running from the front of the truck towards the back of the truck, and then it looks like he's changing direction, and then the video stops.
Okay, so where is Mr. Bryan's house on that map?
I think it's approximately right here.
Okay, and so when the camera initiates, it is when the McMichael's truck is in the view. Is that correct?
That's correct,
okay.
Yes, sir.
Is it stopped?
It appears to be at that point, yes, sir. It stopped, or it has comes into view, it is stopped. Mr. Arbery changes direction, and I believe he changes direction again, and then that's when the camera shuts off. And then it goes from the statement with Travis and Greg that they continue to pursue him this way.
All right, so when Travis's truck is stopped, which you understand, where is Mr. Arbery?
He is on the driver's side, I believe, running back towards the rear of the truck. And I don't recall if the truck begins to move backwards at that point, but then Mr. Arbery changes direction again, I believe, in the video. It's a very short snippet of the video.
So if the driver's side, if this is the driver's side truck and Travis is sitting here in the truck, do you have any information that Travis is pointing a gun out the window?
Do I have any information?
Yeah, do you have any information, or is it on the video that Travis is holding a gun out the window?
I did not see any video of Travis holding a gun out the window.
At this time, okay. All right. Does the video have audio?
Get back to you.
Oh, yes. I'll do it. Does the video have audio?
I don't believe so, no, sir.
Okay.
All right. So while I disagree with everything that the McMichaels and Bryan did in this case, I understand what the defense is trying to do. Even though their questions somewhat can seem ridiculous, they're trying to find a defense here. They're trying to find an avenue for success for their client, because that's what defense attorneys do. They have to argue zealously. We're going to continue more with the preliminary hearing here at Justice and Peace after this break.
My interpretation of the interview, yes.
But at that moment, saying to Mr. Arbery, stop, we want to talk to you, there's nothing illegal about that.
Not at that point, no, sir, not just saying that, no.
All right. And so, without a show of guns or force, you said that Mr. Arbery then begins to run what appears to be back the other direction?
Well, yes,
towards
sir.
Satilla?
Well, it looks like to me he's running back for Satilla, and then like I said, I can't recall if the truck's backing up, but then he changed direction again. From the video, it's very obvious to me at that point Mr. Arbery is trying to escape from Travis and Greg.
Now, you're getting into the mind of Mr. Arbery right now, aren't you?
No, sir, I'm telling you what my interpretation of what I say on the video is.
And tell us what you're basing that interpretation on. What facts do you think support that he is at that moment trying to escape?
Because it looks like he's running away.
He's running away from the truck.
And then I believe the truck starts to back up, and then he changes direction to get back away from it.
And he comes back toward the truck?
As the truck was moving this way. I believe so, sir.
Yes. Okay. At this point in time, do you know where Mr. Bryan's truck is and whether it's come out of the driveway or not?
It has not. It is in video frame, parked in the driveway.
Okay, so as you're trying to interpret the running away aspects of what Mr. Arbery is doing, you're not saying that he ran this way, then stopped because he saw Mr. Bryan's truck and ran back.
No, sir.
You're just seeing him sort of change directions and hover around that area.
No, sir. My interpretation is that he's changing direction because the truck was going backwards.
Okay.
He's trying to escape the truck.
So the truck's going backwards, and he decides to run back in front of the truck.
To get away from it. That's my interpretation of it.
And not back out Satilla's shores.
I think he's just trying to get out of the truck. Now, when they come down here, he turns and then tries to go back out Satilla's shores.
All right. So once Mr. Arbery runs away from that, what do you think happens next?
Well, it's based upon the statements of Travis and Greg McMichael.
Okay.
But that Ahmaud Arbery travels down Burford, with Travis and Greg McMichael in pursuit. They get here again. Mr. Arbery changes direction and tries to go back towards Satilla.
Okay.
This is at this point Greg McMichael exits the passenger side of the truck. He starts to go back down Buford, but Mr. Arbery is running back down Burford. Sorry.
Okay.
At this point, Mr. Bryan pulls his vehicle to try to block the road, to block Mr. Arbery in. This is his first attempt.
Let me stop you there if you don't mind, so I can follow. Mr. McMichael Travis has said that Mr. Arbery ran in front of this car and headed further down Burford, and they drove in his direction at that time.
You're pursuing him.
Did they tell you whether or not they continued to say to him, please stop, we want to talk to you?
They didn't give a statement to me.
Well, I'm sorry, I apologize. You're right. I'm sorry. They gave this statement to Glenn County, but I keep calling you Glenn County and you're not. I apologize. And they gave this statement to Glenn County that they continued to try to engage him and ask him to stop and say, we just want to talk to you.
I don't recall them making that statement at this point in the narrative.
I don't remember that.
No, sir, I don't.
Okay. Nonetheless, at some point, you don't have any information at this point that on that second encounter, which I'll call the second encounter on Burford, where they kind of drove up to him before Mr. Arbery changed directions back, that they pointed any guns at him at that time.
At this time?
When they followed Mr. Arbery further down Burford and they re-engaged and then he took off running back down towards Satilla, that they pulled out any guns at that time.
Neither one of those, neither Greg McMichael nor Travis McMichael confessed to that during the interview.
They used the word confess. I'm just saying, did they say that they took their guns out or not?
Well, that would be okay.
All right, so during the break, we're hearing the defense cross-examine the officer on the stand in the preliminary hearing about where exactly Ahmaud Arbery was running literally for his life as the officer describing it, how the two vehicles are boxing him in. Now, the defense is trying to weave in a narrative that we don't know what exactly Ahmaud Arbery was doing or why he was running, but the officer's making it very clear he's running for his life, as is evident in the last bits of that video. Let's go back into court and see exactly what's going on with the hearing as the officer lays out the case.
Block Mr. Arbery from leaving.
Yes.
Okay. And when he does that, what happens?
As far as with Mr. Arbery?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Arbery, my understanding goes around the truck and in to get around the edge of it, at which point, my understanding from Mr. Bryan, he then goes in pursuit and tries several other times to try to block in Mr. Arbery.
Okay.
His vehicle.
And you testified a little bit about finding some white cotton fibers along the edge of the truck, dent in the truck, some palm slides across it. And I think you testified that Mr. Bryan said that he thought Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the driver door of the truck.
He did. At one point, Mr. Bryan stated that Mr. Arbery was moving along the truck, the driver's side of the truck. He interpreted that movement as Mr. Arbery may be trying to reach the door handle and open the truck. So he gunned the truck. He shot forward.
Did he explain what he was thinking or feeling as Mr. Arbery was trying to reach in the truck, whether he was fearful or that he thought Mr. Arbery was trying to steal his truck or carjack it or anything like that?
I don't recall him making any kind of statement of that. But that is, again, after he's trying to block him in. And subsequent to that, he continued to pursue him and try to block him in.
Okay, fair. But you're saying there's no statement by Mr. Bryan that he feared Mr. Arbery was trying to get in his truck?
I'm saying I don't recall any statement that I have reviewed.
Okay. Do you need your case file? Because a lot of the answers we're starting to get are I don't remember, I don't recall.
No, sir. I did not do the interview with Mr. Bryan, so I cannot answer something that I have not reviewed the recording of or the interview of him. You're asking me, has he said that? I can only tell you to what I have knowledge of.
All right. So you haven't really completed your review of even the video and the interview of Mr. Bryan?
Sir, my agent has interviewed him. He's reported back to me what it is. He has to complete a report, which is attached. And then at that point, I will sign off on the report and attach it. That's part of the process. However, you're asking me specific details about an interview that I was not present at, nor did I review a video on. So I cannot be definitive to say he has not said something if I was not there. I do not want to misspeak.
I got it. And now I understand that you haven't reviewed the video of him. I understand that.
Sir, I don't even know if there is a video. It could have been audio of the interview my agent did with him.
Okay, but I now understand you haven't reviewed that yet, and that's why your answer is I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. Is it significant to you at all if Mr. Arbery would be trying to break into that truck with Mr. Bryan?
No, sir. Again, at this point, I think Mr. Arbery's trying to escape. I would say that he's trying to get away. And Mr. Bryan continues to pursue him and try to block him in again. So
he's trying to get away from Mr. Bryan.
Oh,
I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. No. Yes. You're asking me if it's significant whether or not he was trying to open the driver's side of the door. My answer is that no, because I think Mr. Arbery is motivated by a desire to flee based upon all the information that this has. Also, Mr. Bryan continued to pursue him and try to block him in after that.
Is it your
my understanding?
Is it your understanding or your opinion that Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the driver's side of Mr. Bryan's truck so that he could use it to flee?
Judge, I'm going to object. I think it's been asked and answered, and I don't believe it's pertinent to the issue of probable cause as to the issuance of the arrest warrant.
Is there some reason we just don't play the interview?
No, get down.
Your Honor, I just understood that his testimony on direct was about this interaction, and I'm just trying to follow up on his direct testimony. So is it your belief or understanding, because you're saying that you believe Mr. Arbery was trying to escape?
It is my belief.
Are you saying that he's trying to get into Mr. Bryan's truck and take it over so he can escape?
No, sir. Mr. Bryan indicated that he interpreted Mr. Arbery's actions as trying to open the door.
Okay.
I don't have an opinion whether that was actually true or not. I'm just telling you, my opinion is that at this point, Mr. Arbery is trying to escape.
Okay. Did Did Mr. Bryan say that Mr. Arbery intentionally committed damage to his truck? That he attacked his truck?
Yeah, I don't recall. I don't recall being told whether the. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that answer.
Following this exchange, I guess, between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan's truck, what happens next as far as you know?
My understanding is Mr. Bryan continues to pursue Mr. Arbery up Burford. When he comes to Holmes Road, Mr. Arbery turns on the Holmes Road. Mr. Bryan initially is on Satilla Drive. He turns and then goes down Holmes Road in pursuit.
Okay, may I stop you for just a moment?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any information that Mr. Bryan was communicating with Travis or Greg about the next steps that played out between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan? That Mr. Bryan was saying he's going on Holmes now. If there was any calls or communication between them?
I do not have any information about that.
Or that, okay. And you said that Mr. Bryan goes straight down Satilla, essentially, but Mr. Arbery turns right on Holmes.
I think he's pursuing, my interpretation is that he's pursuing, he overshoots when Mr. Arbery cuts suddenly down Holmes to try to get away. And then Mr. Bryan had to turn back and continue pursuit.
Do you have any information that Travis or Greg saw where Mr. Arbery went, whether it was Satilla or Holmes or otherwise?
No. From the interviews, it appears to me that Travis McMichael's intention was to come back through Zellwood and try to cut Mr. Arbery off here, with Mr. Bryan here, and Mr. Travis can catch him between them here. That's my understanding from the interview.
Right. So your understanding is that what information do you have that Travis McMichael said, I'm going to go up this direction and come down Holmes because I know I can catch Mr. Arbery there? How is it that he is informed, in your opinion, that Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road?
No, I'd say that he's wanting to catch Mr. Arbery here, but when he comes down Holmes Road, he sees Mr. Arbery.
You think he sees him?
Yes, sir. I think he says that.
Okay, so when he comes on Holmes Road, he says he sees him on Holmes Road. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Well, the shooting took place on Holmes Road as well. So during the interview, my understanding is that he sees him here on Holmes Road. But again, like I said, he definitely says he sees him on Holmes Road. He shoots him on Holmes Road.
Okay, so let me just break this down because I want to make sure I understand. Prior to seeing him on Holmes Road, do you have any information that Travis McMichael is aware that Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road?
No, I think from the interview I got is that he's wanting to loop around and catch him here. And again, that's my interpretation of what he is telling the investigator with the Glenn County Police Department.
That he wants to go all the way around to come back to Burford?
And catch him, yes, sir.
And not just back down Burford?
Well, Greg McMichael encourages him to back down Burford and catch him, but Travis says, no, it's loop around.
Okay. But prior to that, we don't have any information that Travis knows Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road. Is that correct?
Not until he sees him on Holmes Road.
And then he comes up and he turns on Holmes Road and he sees him where you were pointing to, higher up Holmes Road. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I believe
he drives on the road and physically sees him up there.
I believe so because Mr. Bryan is here. It's probably not that far now. Mr. Bryan is here, and this is where the video starts, and Mr. Arbery coming back towards Mr. Bryan. At that point, Mr. Bryan puts the phone down. He then pulls off the road to allow Travis McMichael's truck to pass.
Did Travis McMichael ever say to you or Greg say to you that he observed the interaction between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan's truck around the end there of Burford Road, where he may have seen Mr. Arbery attacking the truck or acting in an odd manner about the truck?
Well, again, they didn't make a statement to me. They made it to the Glenn County Police Department. I do not recall them making any kind of statement about seeing him try to attack
Mr. Arbery's truck, Mr. Bryan's truck on Burford.
I do not recall them making any statement reference to that.
And then I think what you said is you believe Mr. McMichael sees Mr. Arbery on the upper part of the road, and then is it that they drive past Mr. Arbery?
And that part is not clear in the interview, exactly how they got in front of Mr. Arbery, and it's not really addressed in the interview. That is just me knowing that they're behind him at this point, and at this point they're in front of him. So at some point they had to pass him, but that is not addressed in the interview.
And do you have any information? Okay. So you don't have any information about what kind of interaction, if any, there was if they were past him or what?
It's not mentioned in the interview.
And to make sure, throughout this entire time, do you have any evidence of any kind of texting communications between the McMichaels and Mr. Bryan or anybody else in the neighborhood as they're trying to communicate about Mr. Arbery, where he is and how they can, stop him or catch him, as you put it?
I have no evidence of that at this point.
There's a moment where you talk about Mr. Bryan's video and he starts running his cell phone. Where do you believe he starts to turn on his cell phone and record?
And it's hard for me to do it on this map. I believe it's somewhere in this area, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I know it's before this curve here, but I believe it's somewhere in this area.
Okay. And can you hear Mr. Bryan say anything throughout that recording?
I believe he makes a statement speaking to himself at one point. And it's after he's put the phone down, I believe. He makes some kind of statement, and I don't remember his exact words, but something along the lines of, I'm going to go on, or something like that.
Okay. I thought I recalled you testifying that Mr. Bryan may have said something to the effect of, do you got him, or lock him in, or something like that. Where do you hear that statement being made?
Well, I don't hear that. That's the statement that he says.
Okay. First, we're getting reports from Attorney Lee Merritt that Ahmaud Arbery's mother actually had to leave during this part of the preliminary hearing just moments ago because of the description of hearing her son being, well, as many as calling, executed in the middle of the streets of Georgia. I want to come back to Adam Conte. Adam, this is one thing that I do think academically is very interesting about William Bryan, about how aiding and abetting works in terms of coordination. The defense is saying, hey, there's no communication between the two of them. They didn't really talk this out. But in another sense, I'm thinking to myself, well, if I was in court and I saw you, Adam, chasing someone down, being your friend, I may help out as well without you and I needing to communicate. So we are acting in coordination without communication. But how does that work out in the court of law?
Well, it depends. In this situation, when you have essentially you look over and you see a truck trying to chase down an individual, you now have to ask yourself what your responsibility is. In this moment, this individual, this man decided, oh, I see two white men chasing down a black man, and I'm going to help him chase that man down. And I'm glad that his mother left the courtroom because he was hunted down like an animal and shot in the street. Specifically to your question, though, if you see something like that happen, as we've seen now the 3 officers in Minnesota, and you stand by or help, then you are complicit or, in fact, aiding a murder. So you have to be vigilant in your choices. You have to be vigilant and know what is going on around you and know the context of what's going on around you. And if you're making a snap decision that leads to some sort of incredible violence or tragedy like that's happened here, you better be prepared for that responsibility because you are part of that problem.
I do want to say that the one little difference between George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery are that in George Floyd, the officers have a duty to actually aid and give help. With Ahmaud Arbery, the way I take it is that William Bryan, in using his vehicle to help snare Ahmaud Arbery and back him towards the McMichaels, that's an affirmative action that can go towards aiding and abetting. But we're going to continue with more in this case and the preliminary hearing after this break.
Brian, can you hear me?
stop
Another
running
thing
whatever.
different too, we're talking about maybe not today, but another time is that, the difference of aiding and abetting in these situations for the officer, it really just comes down to the autopsy, right? Because once the autopsy is
And what is your understanding about why they were
they are
saying
straight
these
up
things?
listed for murder.
They wanted
Versus what this guy did,
and seizing
is,
For what
snaring
purpose?
him instead in the street.
so the police can come and ID him.
And so in saying that, where is Travis in the video and what is he doing with his shotgun that you can see or that you believe?
Pointing at Mr. Aubrey.
So you're saying the video shows that he's pointing it straight at Mr. Harper.
His arm is up in a shooting position is what I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence that the taller that you've seen where the gun is just being held down like this?
It appears that he repositions the firearm, looks more report arms, after you see Mr. Aubrey change direction and going towards the passenger side.
Okay. Port arms being holding the butt of the gun down and the barrel up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's not a firing position, is it?
No, sir. This was after he took the firing position.
After I understand your points, it said stop, get on the ground. The stop, get on the ground, where do you hear that on any kind of recording or anything like that?
That's his statement.
That's a statement. Have you listened to the 911 call that Greg Michaels made?
I have.
Do you hear anything on that call about stop or anything like that? That he is?
Yes, sir. Yes, sorry.
This position of holding the barrel of the gun or in front of the gun down, does that have a name? I've heard the term low ready. Does that sound like something that you're familiar with?
That's not what I would call low ready.
Okay. What is low ready?
Low ready would be still in front of you, but down so you could see over the top of it.
Okay. Is that a firing position or is that like a way to hold the gun safely but still holding?
It would not be safely. It's a way so you can have full view of vision and put up in a firing position very quickly.
Okay. But it's not pointed at somebody at that point. It's pointed down at the ground. Is what you're saying?
Well, its purpose is to be able to have a wider field of view so you're not looking down the sight so you can see the threat, be able to move it into a position to fire very quickly.
And I just want to make sure if you're using your pointer, are you demonstrating that you're pointing it down to the ground?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see evidence of that Mr. Michael had his gun in that position, holding it, pointing down at the ground?
I saw him up in the firing position, and then I believe he moved it to where his hand's up higher.
Okay.
Like this. The video.
Have you taken fingerprints of the gun? Or did the Glenn County Police take fingerprints of the shotgun?
No, sir.
To try to determine where Mr. Harper may have grabbed the gun?
No,
Or whether his hand had gotten on the front of the gun? No fingerprints were taken on the gun?
no, sir.
I'm going to say something super messed up then.
And I think you testified that Mr. McMichael.
All right, so we're nearing the end of Justice and Peace, which means that afterwards, Vincent Velasquez will be here for keeping the peace. We're going to continue with the Ahmaud Arbery preliminary hearing, but Adam, just knowing the standard for preliminary hearing, that being probable cause that a crime occurred in Georgia, do you think there's enough so far to go forward on a felony murder, or is there more that you think we need to hear?
No, I think there's enough. I think there's no question there's enough. In a case like this, there's so much that's really evident thanks to that video, and I am so thankful that that video exists. The video alone, honestly, the prosecutors could have just put in the video and said, "All done, Judge." But you're getting a lot more context. You're hearing now that that the shooter used the N-word after he had shot him. I mean, these are critical details that go to the state of mind, which is going to be critical in determining that this was a felony going forward.
So I guess the major question is, but for the video, do you think we would be here?
I don't know, Brian. I really don't. And that's the problem, because all that we would have then is the word of 3 white guys versus 1 dead person of color. And it's a real problem. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, and I think especially for Justice and Peace, that should be the question we're asking, because this is all great. We have video, but 20 years we didn't have video. What about in communities that don't have cell phones? I mean, I'm talking to you through my phone. Great technology. That's amazing. Does everyone have the same level of technology that I have or you have? Does that mean we're going to miss justice because you don't have the proper phone? Maybe you got a flip phone without a camera? How do we kind of square that peg?
Well, I think the people are squaring that peg by what you just said. People know that they need to be vigilant. They need to have their phones and their cameras ready. Every person has a body camera on them these days with their smartphone, which has done a tremendous amount of good in exposing some of this racism and brutality that has just easily gone under the rug in the past. There's been so many incidents over the last several years that would not have probably been prosecuted or charged even without cell phones. But, and here's the but, we also have to remember that there's a long way to go. If you look at 2017 with Philando Castro, his girlfriend Facebook live streamed his murder. He was shot by a police officer in his car, reaching for his wallet. That police officer was still acquitted. So there's a long way to go, but the more we can expose and the more people we can get involved to really push for change, it's a start.
Absolutely. Adam, I want to thank you very much. I think the best thing I can say to reiterate that this is a start. Like you said, it's gotten better from the past, but this is a start, and we got to keep going. We got to keep being vigilant in all forms of our advocacy. I want to thank you all for joining us here at Justice and Peace. Like I said, Vincent Velasquez will be here with Keeping the Peace, but we're going to continue with the Ahmaud Arbery case. We're going to continue with the peace and seeking justice in these cases and all others.
Just that Mr. Arbery was squared up, ready to fight,
and he
may have grabbed him.
And may have grabbed him. He says he may have hit him. He was not sure about that. He was very inconsistent about what occurred during that time frame because he said his adrenaline was pumping and it happened very quickly.
Did he say that he was afraid of being beat or assaulted by Mr. Arbery?
He said he was afraid that Mr. Arbery would get hold of the shotgun. Yes.
Does the video give you, you said you had some work done to the video to slow it down. In doing that work, are you able to determine where Travis was in front of the car and where Mr. Arbery was in front of the car, whether it was the front right bumper headlight area or the middle area or further to the left? Can you make any determination about that?
Just as in front of the truck, no, sir.
Okay. And did the Glenn County Police Department photograph the front of the truck or look to find blood or anything like that at the time they were investigating on the 23rd?
They photographed the scene, which included the truck in the pictures, yes.
Anything about those photographs lend any information about where they may have been when the first shot was fired?
Not that I can interpret, no, sir.
And it's your belief that the first shot was fired was one of the shots to the chest, is that correct?
Yes.
And you believe that because Travis said that he thought that was the first shot as well?
And the video after the first shot, when Mr. Arbery comes in the frame, he's got blood on front of the shirt.
Okay. You've been able to determine that in the work that you've done. Okay. And then I think you testified that you can then see Mr. Arbery hitting Mr.
One, two,
and grabbing for the gun.
Yes.
And sort of shoving him back across the street out of view.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that distance of that movement by Mr. Arbery kind of overpowering Mr. McMichael back across the street? Have you calculated how far he had to push him to get him out of view?
I would say it was overpowering. I think Mr. Travis said he started retreating backwards.
Trying to get away.
From, yes.
Okay.
After
he shot, that's right. At that time, did he say that Mr. Arbery had his hands on the gun and was trying to take the gun from him?
He said he had his hands on the gun, yes, sir. I don't know if specifically he was trying to pull the gun away or not, but he indicated that he didn't have his hands on the gun.
And did Travis tell you that the second shot came because he was trying to defend himself from what he said was the assault of Mr. Arbery onto him at that point?
What he told Glenn County Police Department.
So he told Glenn County. And the third shot, the same thing. He was still trying to get the gun away from Mr. Arbery, and he shot because Mr. Arbery kept coming at him, essentially. And it's your decision then, as you move forward through the case, that you are of the opinion that this was not self-defense by Mr. McMichael.
I don't believe it was self-defense from Mr. McMichael. I believe it was self-defense from Mr. Aubrey.
That's why you took the warrant.
Yes, sir. I believe Mr. Aubrey was being pursued, and he ran till he couldn't run anymore, and it turned him back to a man with a shotgun, or fight with his bare hands against the man with the shotgun. He chose to fight.
And not to run through a side yard or not to run through another yard or anything like that.
I think his thing was to, I believe Mr. Aubrey's decision was to just try to get away. When he felt like he could not escape, he chose to fight.
But it is clear from the investigation that for the driving and the interactions that took place all around that area, that no shot was fired at any time by anybody prior to the hand-to-hand combat that Mr. Aubrey and Mr. McMichael engaged in.
Hello and welcome to the show, Keeping the Peace. I'm Vince Velasquez, retired detective. And joining me today is our guest today is retired detective Kirk Burkhalter, attorney, retired NYPD detective, law professor, man of many talents. Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Vince. How are you?
Thank you. Very good. So yesterday, as we know, the Minnesota AG has announced that he's upgraded the charges against Officer Derek Chauvin to second-degree murder and has also arrested and charged the other 3 officers for aiding and abetting in second-degree murder. So let's take a look.
Has there been any effort on your part of the Boone County Police Department to also seize Mr. Aubrey's cell phone to do some testing or looking on his phone?
I did. I explored that option. At the time of the shooting incident, Mr. Aubrey did not have a cell phone. It had been broken. Apparently, according to his family here in runs, he would often drop his cell phone and it would break. And the last time he broke it, his mother said, "I'm not buying another phone." And he corrected my error.
In investigating, I'm going to go back and pick up a couple of things that may be a little out of order. In investigating the incidences that were ongoing in Satilla Shores neighborhood, there was an incident on January 1st, 2020, where a car was...
Is it because I'm still on, guys? Do I need to leave?
Mr. McMichael's car. There was another car where another gun had been stolen. Are you aware of that?
I am not.
So fingerprints were taken from that car?
I am not aware of that.
Did you become aware of Officer Rash's involvement with the Glenn County Police Department? Or speak to him about, or have one of your agents speak to him about his trying to assist the Satilla Shores neighborhood with the burglaries and break-ins?
I did, yes. Or I had one of my agents interview him, yes, sir.
Did you learn anything from him that you felt was concerning about the neighbors' efforts or Michael's efforts to solve the crime issue in the neighborhood? What did you learn from him? He could say that.
I believe he had written a report. The way his statement to the agent was that he was familiar with an ongoing trespassing issue, that Greg McMichael he'd interacted with Greg McMichael. Greg McMichael had told him to pass along a message to Larry English that if he saw the guy in the house again, that he'd always call Greg McMichael and provide his number. So Officer Rash did that.
So Officer Rash encouraged Larry English to call Greg McMichael?
No, sir. Officer Rash said he was just passing along the message, was his interpretation. Mr. English, though, did not see the message until after the shooting incident had occurred. He just had missed the text messages that had run through. That's according to his statement.
Okay. warrants that you took for Mr. Travis McMichael.
Counsel, this is your last question. You will take another question.
Yes, sir. This is the end. Thank you. Well, maybe more than one question, but this is the end. I was just going to ask him about the warrants he took.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The warrants that you took, one was for aggravated assault. The basis, the factual basis of the aggravated assault, what are the specific facts that we've discussed that you are saying this is the aggravated assault, that is the aggravated assault here of this count warrant?
My specific fact that I based the warrant on that I provided, it would be that the aggravated assault occurred when Travis McMichael pointed a 12-gauge Remington 870 shotgun at Ahmaud Arbery.
Okay, when you pointed the firearm, and you've described that as when he was standing next to his truck and Mr. Arbery was running towards him, and he held the gun up like this when he was saying stop and get down?
That is one instance, and then Travis McMichael indicates he was pointing the shotgun at Ahmaud Arbery as he was approaching him at the front of the truck as well.
Okay, and then that would be the basis of the aggravated assault. The pointing of the firearm as he was running towards him and he was yelling stop, or when he came around the front of the truck at him and he pointed the gun at him after he came around the front of the truck at Travis.
That's correct. After Travis went around the front of the truck, yes, sir.
And Mr. Arbery came around the front of the truck at Travis. Travis points the gun. That's the aggravated assault at that moment.
And when Mr. Arbery was 30 to 40 yards away and Travis was pointing.
Okay, so now we have a distance. So 30 or 40 yards away.
That's according to Travis McMichael's statement.
Fair. And at the same time, he was 30, 40 yards away. Travis was saying, stop, get on the ground.
That's my understanding of this statement.
Gotcha. And then the document that you created simply states that the offense being described as the accused pointed and discharged a shotgun, which is a deadly weapon capable of causing death or serious bodily injury, at Ahmaud Arbery. This statement is the sum total of what you presented to the signing magistrate. Is that correct?
That's presented to a Superior Court judge and no offered oral testimony in reference to this case.
So you're saying you actually gave oral testimony in addition to what you made in your affidavit?
That's correct, yes.
And where is that oral testimony reflected? Is it written down now? Is it on a document?
No, sir, I provided to the judge.
The judge himself, if he were sitting in this witness stand, would say, yes, I got additional information outside of the four corners of this document.
I'm sure he would, yes.
You're sure? Okay. Now, moving to the felony murder, the cause of death, obviously, Mr. Arbery was shot and killed on that day. And so the basis is what exactly? That he was shot and killed that day?
During the commission of the felony to aggravated assault.
And it being the pointing of the gun as he was approaching and the pointing of it as he came around the front of the car.
That's correct, yes.
I don't have anything further. I appreciate your patience with me.
All right, we'll be in recess until 2:15.
Thank you.
All rise. Deputies.
All right, so of course it's Brian Buckmeyer, not Vincent here, but we just saw the end of that preliminary hearing. I know that we have Professor Burkhart with us. Professor, the last few questions are really trying to get to the elements of the crime. What do you think was made of those last questions?
So, there wasn't anything so damning on the part of the defense there. And a lot of what we know already. So it seemed like we had this, what was established was the position, the relative positions of the defendant and the victim. This goes hand in hand with what we heard earlier, right? So this kind of started with McMichael's testimony, or statements rather, that he could tell from 30 or 40 yards away, based on his prior Coast Guard training, that Mr. Arbery was not going to comply. So every action that was taken after that seemed to fall in line with his belief that this person was committing a crime and that he wasn't going to comply. So this coming from around the car and the shotgun blast and so forth. So it's nothing that we didn't expect already. I certainly don't see there any lack of probable cause on the part of the state to charge the McMichaels as a result of what we've seen so far in the hearing.
Okay. Now, Professor, it might have been Travis McMichael who did the shooting, but we know that Gregory McMichael has the prior history with being a part of the police department in that area, as well as with the district attorney's office. It seems that they're trying to use some sort of police tactics because they're trying to make a citizen's arrest. If we're going to compare those actions to what the police are trained to do or authorized to do, that even be good enough to say, hey, police officers would have done the exact same thing, so therefore I'm innocent because I'm making a citizen's arrest?
I would have to say no. And I think that you could get a litany of law enforcement officials and folks with law enforcement experience to state that that is a textbook way to not arrest someone. First of all, the use of deadly physical force where there was clearly, or there was no indication that any force was going to be used against them to effect the arrest. So that's the starting point there. Most law enforcement officials don't walk around with shotguns. They have other firearms, but certainly that's the starting point. And there really didn't seem to be, just judging from the video alone, and also the testimony of the defendants, you didn't hear a lot about an attempt to take Arbery into custody. The only thing you heard was this presumption that Arbery was not going to go quietly. So this is kind of a textbook example of what not to do. Certainly, at that point, they didn't have probable cause, from my opinion, to believe that Arbery committed a crime. So at best, this would have warranted some type of investigation or questioning and so forth from a law enforcement perspective. Certainly when conducting a citizen arrest, citizens don't have the right to detain and question others, except for narrow instances. And as we've discussed plenty of times, certainly department store security personnel have the right to stop and detain someone. But the average person doesn't have the right to stop and detain someone and question them, even if they're in front of their home walking by and that you're suspicious. So once again, kind of a textbook case of what not to do from a law enforcement perspective.
Exactly. You hear it there, what not to do from a law enforcement perspective. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more the Ahmaud Arbery case in the preliminary hearing. One second. Okay, so I'm staying. Gotcha. Okay. So you want me to do the, you said the justice and peace rundown?